December 1944. The Belgian Ardennes. Snow falls thick and silent over the village of Rocheville, a small farming community caught between German occupation and the distant promise of Allied liberation. The cobblestone streets glisten with ice under the pale winter sun, and smoke rises from chimneys in thin, desperate columns. For 3 years, the villagers have learned to survive under the weight of occupation, their lives measured in rations, curfews, and the constant presence of enemy soldiers. But in this quiet corner of the war, where every word could be your last and every shadow might hide an informant, the people of Rocheville guard their secrets like they guard their lives. If you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more incredible wartime tales. Marie Duchamp stands at her kitchen window watching the patrol march past her farmhouse. She's 32 years old, though the war has aged her beyond her years. Her hands, red and raw from washing in cold water, grip the windowsill as she counts the soldiers. 8 men, the same number as yesterday. The same route they've taken for weeks now, past the church, through the square, down the old forest road. She knows their schedule better than they do. She has to. Her younger brother, Thomas, sits at the kitchen table behind her, pretending to read a newspaper that's 3 weeks old. He's 19, thin as a rail, with the kind of nervous energy that comes from living on the edge of discovery. His fingers drum against the worn wood, a habit that drives Marie mad with worry. Any sign of anxiety could draw attention, and attention means questions they cannot answer. The patrol stops in the square. Marie's breath catches in her throat. She watches as the commander, a young hauptmann named Weber, speaks to his men. He's pointing toward the forest, toward the old Miller estate that's been abandoned since the beginning of the occupation, toward the place the villagers whisper about when they think no one is listening. Thomas stands and moves beside his sister. His voice is barely a whisper. They're talking about it again. Marie nods slowly. For months now, the German patrols have heard the stories. The ghost of old Miller, they say, who hanged himself in despair when the war came. The villagers speak of strange lights in the abandoned house at night, of footsteps in empty rooms, of a presence that keeps even the bravest soldiers away after dark. It's become a local legend, one that the occupying forces dismiss with laughter during the day, but avoid when twilight falls. But Marie knows the truth. There is no ghost. There are 6 Allied soldiers hiding in a bunker beneath the Miller estate. Men who parachuted behind enemy lines 2 months ago and never made it back to their lines. Men who depend on the villagers for food, for information, for their very survival. And the ghost story is all that keeps the Germans from searching too carefully, from discovering what lies beneath the rotting floorboards of that supposedly haunted house. The patrol moves on, and Marie releases a breath she didn't know she was holding. Thomas returns to his seat, but his leg bounces with unspent anxiety. How much longer can we keep this up? He asks. Marie doesn't answer. She doesn't have an answer. Every day is borrowed time. Every supply run to the bunker is a gamble with their lives. But what choice do they have? To abandon those men would be to surrender whatever humanity this war hasn't already taken from them. That evening, as darkness settles over Rocheville like a heavy blanket, Marie wraps bread and dried meat in a cloth and tucks it into her coat. Thomas watches from the doorway, his face pale in the lamplight. "I should go with you," he says for the 100th time. "No," Marie replies firmly. "If something happens, someone needs to be here. Someone needs to be safe." The lie tastes bitter on her tongue. There is no safety anymore. But at least if she's caught alone, Thomas might survive. The walk to the Miller estate takes 20 minutes through the forest, following paths she's memorized in the dark. The December cold bites through her coat, and her breath forms clouds in the freezing air. Above her, bare branches creak in the wind, creating the perfect soundtrack for a ghost story. She almost smiles at the irony. The house looms ahead, a dark silhouette against the starlit sky. Its windows are broken, its roof partially collapsed. To anyone passing by, it looks exactly like what it's supposed to be, a ruin, abandoned and forgotten. Marie approaches carefully, scanning the tree line for any sign of patrol. The Germans avoid this place after dark, but she can never be too careful. She enters through the back door, moving with practiced silence across the debris-strewn floor. In the far corner, hidden beneath a section of collapsed ceiling that's actually carefully arranged, is the entrance to the cellar. Marie moves the boards aside and descends the narrow stairs into darkness. A light flickers on below. Captain James Morrison of the British Army stands at the bottom of the stairs, a pistol in his hand until he recognizes her face. Then he lowers the weapon, relief flooding his features. "Marie! Thank God!" The bunker is small, barely large enough for 6 men to sleep. It was built during the Great War, a forgotten remnant of an earlier conflict that now serves as sanctuary for these stranded soldiers. The air is stale and cold, thick with the smell of unwashed bodies and desperation. But these men are alive, and that's all that matters. Marie distributes the food, while Morrison briefs her on their situation. They've been monitoring German radio traffic with a small receiver they managed to salvage. The news is both encouraging and terrifying. Allied forces are pushing forward, but the German military is planning a major counteroffensive. Rocheville sits directly in the path of what could become a massive battle. "We need to get word to command," Morrison says quietly. "If what we're hearing is accurate, they're planning to strike through the Ardennes. It could change everything." Marie understands the implications. These men aren't just hiding anymore. They have intelligence that could save lives, that could alter the course of the war. But getting that information out means taking risks that could expose the entire network of villagers who've been helping them. The next morning brings new complications. Hauptmann Weber has received orders to conduct a thorough search of the area, including all abandoned buildings. The ghost story that has protected them for so long is about to be tested like never before. Marie learns this from Madame Blanc, the baker's wife, who overhears the officers talking in the cafe. The search is scheduled for tomorrow morning. They have less than 24 hours to decide, evacuate the soldiers and risk being spotted during movement, or trust the ghost story to hold and pray the Germans don't look too carefully. That night, the village council meets in secret. 7 people crowd into the back room of the church, speaking in hushed tones while Father Bernard keeps watch at the door. These are the people who know the truth, who've risked everything to keep the secret. And now they must decide how much more they're willing to risk. Madame Blanc speaks first. "We should move them. Tonight. The forest is our best chance." "The Germans have patrols everywhere," counters Henri, the schoolteacher. 6 men moving through the woods? They'd be spotted within an hour. Marie listens to the debate, her mind racing. Then an idea begins to form, dangerous and desperate, but possibly their only chance. What if we give them what they expect to find? Everyone turns to look at her. "The patrol believes in the ghost story, at least partially," she continues. "They're afraid of the place. What if we make that fear work for us? What if we make them want to leave without searching too carefully?" Father Bernard leans forward, his weathered face thoughtful. "You're talking about staging something, making them believe the stories are real." "Not just believe," Marie says, her voice gaining strength, "making them afraid enough that they don't want to stay long enough to search properly. We control what they see, what they hear. We turn their superstition into our weapon. The plan takes shape over the next hour. It's risky, potentially suicidal, but it's the only option that doesn't involve moving the soldiers through German-controlled territory. Thomas will create sounds in the house using old pipes and loose boards. Henri will use mirrors to create strange reflections. Marie will release smoke through carefully placed vents. They'll transform the abandoned house into exactly what the Germans fear it is, a place of supernatural dread. After the meeting disperses, Marie walks home through the empty streets, her mind racing with everything that could go wrong. The December wind cuts through her coat, and she pulls it tighter around herself. Thomas waits for her at the kitchen table, his face drawn with worry in the lamplight. "Well, we're really doing this," he says. "It's not a question." Marie sits across from him, suddenly feeling the weight of 3 years of occupation pressing down on her shoulders. She thinks about their parents, who died in the first winter of the war when pneumonia swept through the village. She thinks about the life they had before all this, when the biggest worry was whether the crops would be good and if there would be enough hay for winter. "Do you remember what Papa used to say?" Marie asks softly. "About the Great War?" Thomas nods slowly. "That good men stayed silent, and that's how evil won." "We're not staying silent," Marie says, reaching across the table to grip her brother's hand. "Whatever happens tomorrow, we're not staying silent." They spend the rest of the evening preparing. Marie boils water and makes what little coffee they have left, knowing it might be their last quiet moment together. Thomas cleans the old hunting rifle their father left them, though they both know it won't be much use against a German patrol. Still, the familiar action of caring for the weapon brings him comfort. Around midnight, Henri arrives with the materials they'll need. Mirrors carefully wrapped in cloth, a small oil lamp with colored glass, sulfur powder mixed with other chemicals to create the right smell and smoke. He spreads everything on the table, and they review the plan once more. "The timing has to be perfect," Henri says, his schoolteacher precision showing through. "If the sounds start too early, they'll investigate thoroughly. Too late, and they'll have already found the bunker entrance. We have maybe a 3-minute window." Marie memorizes every detail. She'll be outside, watching, ready to signal when the patrol enters. Thomas will be in the crawl space beneath the main floor. Henri in the attic. Each of them isolated, unable to communicate once it starts, each depending on the others to play their part perfectly. As Henri prepares to leave, he pauses at the door. "Marie, if this goes wrong, if they catch us, you know what they'll do." "I know," she replies steadily. "But if we do nothing, we know what we are." The night passes slowly. Marie doesn't sleep, though she lies in bed and tries. Every sound outside makes her jump. Every creak of the house settling makes her heart race. She thinks about Captain Morrison and his men. sheltering in that cold bunker, depending on people they barely know to save their lives. She thinks about Weber and his patrol, young men following orders in a war they might not even believe in. She thinks about choices and consequences and the thin line between courage and foolishness. At dawn, she rises and dresses carefully. Layers of warm clothing, sturdy boots, her mother's wool scarf wrapped around her neck. She looks at herself in the small mirror above the wash basin and barely recognizes the woman staring back. When did she become this person? This woman who plans deceptions and risks execution to protect strangers. The war has changed her in ways she's only beginning to understand. Thomas appears in her doorway, already dressed, his face pale but determined. "I'm ready," he says. They eat breakfast in silence, bread and weak tea saved from their rations. Marie wonders if it's the last meal they'll share, but pushes the thought away. She can't afford doubt now, not with so much depending on them. At 8 o'clock they leave for the Miller estate. The morning is bitterly cold, the sky heavy with clouds that promise more snow. The village is quiet, most people staying inside where it's warmer, where they can pretend for a few hours that the war is somewhere else. But Marie sees curtains moving as they pass, sees faces in windows. Everyone knows what's happening today. Everyone is holding their breath. The Miller estate looks even more forlorn in the gray morning light. The house sags like an old man bent with grief, its windows like empty eyes staring at nothing. Marie and Thomas enter through the back, and Henri is already there, having arrived before dawn to set everything in place. They do a final check of all the mechanisms, the pipes that will create the moaning sounds, adjusted to resonate through the hollow walls, the chains in the attic, positioned to drag across the floor at the right moment, the smoke vents, carefully hidden but ready to pour forth their sulphurous fog, the mirrors, angled to catch and reflect the lamplight in unsettling ways. And the recording, old Miller's voice preserved on a phonograph cylinder that Henri discovered in the village archives, now wired through a speaker hidden in the walls. 15 minutes, Henri says, checking his watch. The patrol always leaves the square at 9:15. Marie descends to the bunker one last time. Morrison and his men are packed and ready, prepared to fight their way out if the deception fails. She sees the tension in their faces, the way their hands rest near their weapons. These are men who have faced death before, but waiting like this, trapped underground while others determine their fate, might be the hardest thing they've done. "Whatever happens," Morrison says quietly, "you've given us a chance. That's more than we had." Marie nods, not trusting herself to speak. Then she climbs back up, helps Thomas and Henri conceal the entrance, and takes her position in the woods outside. The next morning arrives cold and gray, with fresh snow falling steadily. The patrol gathers in the square at 9 o'clock sharp. 8 soldiers, weapons ready, led by Hauptmann Weber. Marie watches from her window as they prepare to march toward the Miller estate. Her heart pounds so hard she can hear it in her ears. Thomas is already in position, hidden in a crawl space they'd discovered during their preparations. Henri waits in the attic with his mirrors and a small lamp. Father Bernard will create a distraction in the village if things go wrong, giving the others a chance to escape. It's not much of a plan, but it's all they have. The patrol reaches the house at 9:30. Weber orders his men to surround the building before approaching the front door. Marie, watching from a position in the nearby woods, sees the soldiers exchange nervous glances. The ghost stories have done their work well. These men don't want to be here. Weber kicks open the front door. The wood splinters, the sound echoing through the forest. The soldiers enter, their rifles raised, sweeping the rooms one by one. Marie can barely breathe. Everything depends on timing now. A sound echoes through the house. Not loud, but distinctly unnatural. A low moan that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere, rising and falling like a voice in pain. Thomas, using the pipes exactly as planned. The soldiers freeze, looking at each other with wide eyes. Weber shouts orders, trying to maintain control, but Marie can see the fear taking root. Another sound follows, this time a heavy dragging noise from above. Henri, pulling chains across the attic floor. A soldier points his rifle at the ceiling, his hands shaking. Then the smoke begins. Thin wisps at first, seeping up through the floorboards, carrying the smell of sulfur and decay. Marie has mixed it carefully, using materials that will create the impression of something old and wrong. The smoke thickens, filling the room with an unnatural haze. A flash of light reflects off Henri's mirrors, creating the illusion of a figure moving in the upper window. One of the soldiers cries out, taking a step backward. Weber yells at his men to hold their positions, but Marie can see he's shaken too. The lieutenant beside him is pale as death. The sounds intensify, moaning, dragging, the creak of floorboards above, and then Thomas plays his final card. A recording of old Miller's voice, scratchy and barely audible, played through a hidden speaker they'd rigged the night before. The words are in German, ancient sounding, speaking of death and vengeance and the price of war. It's too much. The soldiers break, backing toward the door even as Weber screams at them to hold. One man runs outright, stumbling through the snow. Another follows. Within moments, the entire patrol is in retreat, leaving the house behind them with barely a glance at the cellar entrance. Marie watches them go, her entire body trembling with relief and residual terror. They did it. The ghost story held. The soldiers saw exactly what they expected to see, and their fear did the rest. She waits in the woods for 15 minutes, making sure the patrol doesn't return, before signaling to Thomas and Henri. They emerge from the house like specters themselves, covered in dust and cobwebs, their faces showing the strain of maintaining absolute silence while chaos reigned around them. Thomas collapses against a tree, his legs suddenly unable to support him. The adrenaline that has kept him moving drains away, leaving him shaking and pale. Marie kneels beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder, saying nothing because there are no words for what they've just survived. Henri leans against the house, breathing hard. "That was closer than I thought it would be," he admits, his schoolteacher composure cracking slightly. "When that soldier pointed his rifle at the ceiling, I thought he was going to shoot. I was lying right there, 3 feet above his head." Marie helps Thomas to his feet, and the three of them make their way back through the forest, taking separate paths to avoid suspicion. She reaches her farmhouse just as the church bells ring noon, and she forces herself to move through the normal routines of the day, feeding the chickens, carrying water from the well, mending clothes by the window. Anyone watching must see only a woman going about her daily business. Nothing unusual, nothing worth reporting. But inside, her mind won't stop replaying every moment of the morning. The fear in the German soldier's eyes, the way Weber's voice had cracked when he shouted orders his men no longer obeyed, the terrible risk they took, and the narrow margin by which they succeeded. It could so easily have gone wrong. One soldier, braver than the rest, one decision to search more thoroughly, and everything would have collapsed. That afternoon, Madame Blanc comes to visit, bringing bread as a pretense. But once inside, she grabs Marie's hands, her own trembling. "The whole village is talking about it," she whispers urgently. "The patrol came back white as sheets. They're saying the Miller house truly is haunted, that they heard voices of the dead, saw things that can't be explained." Marie feels a grim satisfaction. The story is spreading exactly as they hoped, but Madame Blanc's next words chill her blood. "But Weber is furious. He's reported it to his superiors, claiming the villagers are playing tricks. He wants to prove we're hiding something." The satisfaction evaporates, replaced by cold dread. They won the battle, but may have lost the war. By making the Germans look foolish, by exploiting their fears so effectively, they've created an enemy who now has something to prove. But the victory is short-lived. That evening, Marie learns from Madame Blanc that Weber has reported the incident to his superiors. The house is now officially marked as off-limits, which seems like good news until she hears the rest. The German command doesn't believe in ghosts. They believe the villagers are hiding something, and they're sending an SS investigation team to find out what. The timeline has collapsed. What they gained in the morning, they've lost by nightfall. The SS won't be frightened away by smoke and mirrors. They'll tear the house apart board by board until they find what they're looking for. The Allied soldiers must be evacuated immediately, regardless of the risk. Morrison takes the news calmly when Marie tells him. He's a soldier. He understands that plans change, that survival often comes down to impossible choices. "How long do we have?" he asks. 2 days at most, Marie replies. Maybe less. The escape plan is desperate. The soldiers will split into 3 pairs, each taking a different route through the forest toward the Allied lines. The villagers will provide what supplies they can, along with civilian clothes that might help them blend in if they're spotted. The chances of all 6 men making it through are slim, but it's better than waiting to be discovered. Marie spends the evening gathering supplies, every scrap of food she can spare, every piece of clothing that might fit. She empties her mother's old trunk, pulling out her father's winter coat, a pair of boots that Thomas has outgrown, scarves and gloves knitted years ago for a life that no longer exists. Each item carries memories, but memories are luxuries they can't afford anymore. Other villagers contribute what they can. Henri brings maps he's carefully copied from school atlases, marking safe routes and German checkpoints. Father Bernard provides forged travel documents, created with painstaking care by a former printer who lost his shop in the first year of occupation. Madame Blanc donates her late husband's papers, identification that might pass inspection if the soldiers are stopped. That night, Marie sits with Morrison and his men in the bunker, sharing what little food remains and speaking quietly about their lives before the war. The temperature has dropped and their breath mists in the cold air. The single lamp casts long shadows on the earthen walls, making the cramped space feel even smaller. Morrison talks about his wife in London, about the daughter he's never met, born while he was behind enemy lines. He pulls a photograph from his jacket, the edges worn from handling. "Emily," he says softly, staring at the image of a woman holding an infant. She was 6 months pregnant when I left. Maggie must be almost 2 now. She won't know me when I get back. You'll get back, Marie says with more confidence than she feels. You'll know her, and she'll know you. Corporal Davies describes his family's pub in Wales, the way the afternoon light would stream through the windows, the regulars who came every evening like clockwork. My da ran it for 40 years, he says. His da before him. It's what we do. When this is over, that's where I'll be, pulling pints and listening to the same stories I've heard 1,000 times. Sergeant Walker shares memories of fishing in the Scottish Highlands, of rivers so clear you could see every stone on the bottom, of salmon jumping in the morning mist. His voice carries a longing that goes beyond simple nostalgia. It's the ache of a man who doesn't know if he'll ever see home again. Private Thompson, the youngest at barely 20, talks about his girl back in Manchester, about plans to marry when the war ends. Lieutenant Ashford, quiet and reserved, speaks of his intention to become a teacher, to help rebuild what the war has destroyed. Private Collins dreams of traveling, of seeing the world in peacetime without a rifle in his hands. These men are more than soldiers to Marie now. They're individuals, with families, with dreams, with futures that depend on the next 48 hours going exactly right. She's invested too much, risked too much to lose them now. Why did you do it? Morrison asks suddenly. Risk everything for us? We're strangers, enemy soldiers in your country. Marie is quiet for a long moment, considering her answer. My father used to say that we're defined by what we do when no one is watching, when there's no reward except knowing we did the right thing. You're not strangers anymore, and this isn't about countries or armies. It's about not becoming the kind of person who could have helped, but chose not to. Morrison nods slowly, understanding in his eyes. After the war, if I make it home, I'll tell them about you, about this village, about people who had every reason to look away but didn't. If you make it home, Marie says gently, just live well, that's enough. The following morning brings the first pair of soldiers to the evacuation point. Morrison and Davies, dressed in borrowed civilian clothes, their military uniforms buried in the bunker. Marie guides them to the edge of the village before dawn, pointing them toward the safest route through the forest. Morrison grips her hand for a moment before leaving. Thank you, he says simply. Then they're gone, disappearing into the morning mist like ghosts themselves. The second pair leaves that evening, Walker and Private Thompson taking a more northern route. Henri guides them this time, using back roads and farm paths he's known since childhood. Marie waits at home with Thomas, listening to every sound, jumping at every distant voice. The final pair, Lieutenant Ashford and Private Collins, are scheduled to leave the next morning, but that night the SS arrives early. Marie hears the trucks before she sees them. 3 vehicles, carrying at least 20 men, pulling into the village square just after midnight. She wakes Thomas immediately, and together they watch from the darkened window as soldiers pour out, fanning through the streets with systematic efficiency. They're searching houses, not the Miller estate, not yet, but the village itself, looking for evidence of resistance activity, for signs of collaboration with the enemy. Marie's heart sinks. If they search her house, they'll find the extra rations she's been storing, the medical supplies she's been hoarding, evidence enough to warrant interrogation at best, execution at worst. Thomas grabs her arm. We need to warn them, Ashford and Collins. Marie knows he's right, but getting to the Miller estate now, with SS all over the village, would be suicide. She's paralyzed with indecision, caught between the need to act and the certainty of capture. The decision is made for her when Father Bernard appears at their back door, breathing hard from running. They're heading to the estate, he gasps. Now, someone talked, or they found evidence. I don't know which, but they know. The 3 of them run through the forest, abandoning caution for speed. They reach the house just minutes before the SS trucks. Marie descends into the bunker to find Ashford and Collins already prepared, weapons in hand, resigned to their fate. There's no time, Ashford says quietly. We'll hold them here. You need to go. But Marie shakes her head. There's another way. The old drainage tunnel. It was built during the Great War, runs under the forest for half a mile. The entrance is behind a false wall in the back of the cellar. She discovered it only days ago, during her preparations for the ghost story staging. The tunnel is partially collapsed, filled with debris and standing water, but it's a chance. Their only chance now. They tear away the false wall, revealing the black mouth of the tunnel beyond. It's narrow, barely wide enough for a man to crawl through, and the air that emerges smells of rot and stagnant water. The darkness beyond is absolute, impenetrable, terrifying in its completeness. How long is it? Ashford asks, peering into the void. Half a mile, maybe more, Marie replies. It was built as an escape route during the Great War. Parts of it have collapsed, but Thomas and I checked it yesterday. You can get through if you're careful. Collins pulls a small flashlight from his pack, but Marie stops him. No lights once you're 50 meters in. The tunnel has ventilation shafts. If the SS sees light coming from the ground, they'll know. Ashford nods, understanding the implications. They'll be crawling through pitch darkness, unable to see obstacles, trusting only touch and instinct to guide them. One wrong turn where the tunnel branches, one moment of panic in the suffocating blackness, and they could be lost. Stay close together, Thomas instructs. The tunnel slopes downward for the first 100 meters, then levels out. There's water at the lowest point, about waist deep. After that, it climbs again. The exit is hidden in a ravine about half a mile northeast of here. Ashford grips Thomas's shoulder. Thank you for everything. Just survive, Thomas replies. Make it home? That's thanks enough. Ashford and Collins enter first, disappearing into the darkness within seconds. Marie watches the beam of their flashlight fade as they descend deeper into the earth. Then Thomas prepares to follow, pulling on the heavy coat Marie gave him, checking the small pack of supplies. Marie grabs her brother's arm, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of what's happening. This might be the last time she sees him. If the tunnel collapses, if they're caught at the exit, if anything goes wrong, Thomas will die in darkness beneath the frozen earth. Be careful, she whispers, her voice cracking. Please, Thomas, be careful. He embraces her tightly. I'll come back, I promise. We all will. Then he's gone, following the soldiers into the tunnel. Marie watches until even the faint sound of movement fades away, leaving only silence and the cold air flowing from the tunnel mouth. She moves to follow, but Father Bernard stops her. Someone needs to stay, he says gently. Someone needs to be here when they arrive, to give a reason for voices, for activity. Otherwise, they'll know people just left. Marie understands. She also understands what staying means. But she nods, and Father Bernard joins her as they hear the trucks arrive above. They work quickly to replace the false wall, hiding the tunnel entrance as best they can. Marie's hands shake as she positions the boards, knowing that in moments, SS soldiers will be standing where she stands now. Father Bernard helps her scatter debris over their footprints, trying to make the cellar look undisturbed. We gave them a chance, Father Bernard says quietly. Whatever happens now, we gave them a chance. The sound of boots on the floor above makes them both freeze. Voices in German, sharp and commanding. The systematic search has begun. The SS officer who descends into the cellar is everything Marie has heard about and feared. Cold eyes that seem to see through skin and bone, precise movements that waste no energy, the kind of man who views cruelty as efficiency. His uniform is immaculate despite the journey, every button polished, every crease sharp. He surveys the bunker with professional interest, noting the sleeping areas, the supplies, the radio equipment that Morrison's team left behind. So, he says in perfect French, his accent barely noticeable, the ghost story was quite clever. Who else knows about this place? Marie meets his eyes steadily, forcing herself not to look away. She learned long ago that showing fear only encourages predators. Everyone and no one. We're a small village. We protect each other. He smiles, and it's worse than anger would have been. It's the smile of a man who enjoys his work, who takes satisfaction in breaking people down piece by piece. Yes, I've noticed how protective you all are. Very admirable, very foolish. He walks slowly around the bunker, his boots clicking on the stone floor. He picks up items and examines them. A British cigarette case, an empty ration tin, a newspaper 3 months old. Each one is evidence, each one another nail in their coffin. How many soldiers? He asks casually, as if discussing the weather. I don't know what you mean, Marie replies. He turns to look at her, his expression unchanged. Please, let's not insult each other's intelligence. This bunker housed multiple men. The radio equipment is British military issue. The supplies are Allied rations. How many, and where did they go? Marie says nothing. Father Bernard stands beside her, equally silent. The officer sighs, as if disappointed by their lack of cooperation. You understand that I can make this very difficult for you, he continues, or very easy. It's your choice. Tell me what I want to know, and perhaps you live to see another sunrise. Remain silent, and I promise you'll wish you'd spoken. He moves closer, close enough that Marie can smell tobacco on his breath, see the tiny scar above his left eyebrow. I've broken stronger people than you. Soldiers with training, with loyalty to their cause. What do you have? A misplaced sense of honor? A naive belief that your sacrifice matters? Marie thinks about Thomas crawling through the darkness of the tunnel, about Morrison and his men making their way toward freedom. Every minute she can buy them is another minute they get farther away. Every question she doesn't answer is another chance they survive. I'm just a farmer, she says quietly. I don't know anything about soldiers or radios. The interrogation lasts for hours. He asks questions Marie can't answer without condemning everyone she knows. He makes threats that turn her blood cold. But through it all, she clings to one thought. The tunnel. The escape. Ashford and Collins and Thomas, crawling through the dark, getting farther away with every minute she can buy them. Father Bernard stands beside her throughout, silent and strong, lending her courage simply by being there. When the SS officer finally orders them taken into custody, they walk with their heads high. But as they're led up the stairs, Marie hears it, the distant sound of gunfire from the west. Not German weapons, Allied weapons. The distinctive crack of American rifles, the heavier sound of British machine guns, the offensive the soldiers had warned about, arriving exactly when it was supposed to. The SS officer hears it too. His expression shifts from smug confidence to concern. He barks orders in German, and suddenly the soldiers are rushing to their trucks, priorities shifting from interrogation to survival. In the chaos, a young private fumbles with the rope binding Marie's hands, and it loosens just enough. She doesn't wait for permission. She runs, pulling Father Bernard with her, disappearing into the forest as the first artillery shells begin to fall. Behind them, the village erupts in confusion and fire as the war that has lurked in the distance finally crashes home. The explosions are deafening, each one a physical force that shakes the ground beneath their feet. Marie pulls Father Bernard behind a fallen tree as shrapnel tears through the branches above them. Smoke fills the air, acrid and choking, mixing with the smell of burning wood and something worse that she tries not to identify. They run through chaos. German soldiers scatter in every direction, some trying to organize a defense, others simply fleeing. The SS trucks are already moving, abandoning the village as the Allied advance becomes impossible to deny. Marie sees Weber in the distance, screaming orders that no one follows, his carefully maintained authority dissolving in the face of real warfare. An explosion erupts 20 meters to their left, throwing dirt and debris into the air. Marie feels the heat of it, feels chunks of frozen earth rain down around them. Father Bernard stumbles, and she catches him, hauling him back to his feet. They can't stop. To stop is to die. The forest offers some protection, the trees absorbing some of the shrapnel, but it's minimal. They run until Marie's lungs burn, until every breath is fire, until her legs threaten to give out beneath her. But still she runs, because stopping means capture, and capture means death for everyone she's trying to protect. After what feels like hours, but is probably minutes, they reach the ravine where the tunnel exits. Marie finds Thomas and the British soldiers 3 miles from the village, sheltering in a ravine as the battle rages overhead. They're alive. Bruised, exhausted, covered in filth from the tunnel, but alive. Thomas embraces his sister, and for the first moment in years, Marie allows herself to cry. The battle for the Ardennes lasts for weeks. Rocheville changes hands 3 times before the Allies finally push through. The village is damaged, buildings destroyed, lives lost. But it survives. The people survive. In January, as the last German forces retreat and Allied troops establish control, Captain Morrison returns to the village. He's come to thank the people who saved his life, and to tell them that the intelligence his team provided helped limit the German offensive's effectiveness. Lives were saved because of what the villagers risked, because of what they did. Marie stands in the ruins of the Miller estate, looking at the collapsed bunker where men lived like rats for months, where their ghost story became legend. Morrison stands beside her, and they don't need to speak. Some things go beyond words. You gave us something to fight for, Morrison says finally. A reminder of why this war matters, because of people like you who risk everything for strangers. Marie shakes her head. Not strangers. Not anymore. Never again. The village rebuilds slowly. Spring comes late that year, but when it arrives, it brings hope. Thomas helps replant the fields that were torn up by tanks. Father Bernard reopens the church, its roof repaired with timber donated by the British Army. Madame Blanc returns to her bakery, filling the square with the smell of fresh bread once more. And Marie Duchamp, who spent months living with the knowledge that every day might be her last, who stared down SS interrogators and crawled through darkness to save lives she'd never met, goes back to her farm and begins the work of living again. Years later, when historians write about the war in the Ardennes, they'll mention the battle, the casualties, the strategic implications. They might not mention a small village called Rocheville, or a ghost story that protected Allied soldiers, or a woman named Marie who proved that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the refusal to let fear stop you. But those who lived it, those who survived it, they remember. They remember that in the darkest hours of history, ordinary people made extraordinary choices, that a simple act of compassion became a lifeline, that hope persisted even when everything said it shouldn't. The ghost of the Miller estate fades into legend, replaced by new stories, new memories. But sometimes, on quiet winter evenings when snow falls over the Ardennes, the old-timers in Rocheville still gather and speak of that time, of the patrol that was frightened away, of the soldiers who escaped through an ancient tunnel, of the price of survival and the value of human decency in times of inhumanity. And they remember Marie, standing at her kitchen window, watching the patrols pass, counting soldiers and measuring risks, and deciding every single day that some things are worth fighting for, some things are worth dying for, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply refuse to look away when someone needs help. The war ended. The soldiers went home. The village rebuilt. Life continued. But the lessons remained passed down through generations, a reminder that even in the worst of times, humanity finds a way to shine through the darkness, one choice at a time, one life saved at a time, one small village deciding that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it.